Live from downtown Vancouver at the Vancouver Film School campus, it's time for EP Live. Hey, welcome to EPN. My name is Victor Lucas, and we bring you the latest in everything cool. It is Wednesday, and we are going to have a fantastic episode for you. Wednesday, August 14th is a very busy day, it feels like. Lots of big news hitting today, embargoes breaking, like the Borderlands 3 information, which we're going to have some very soon for you in the show. And we've got a phenomenal guest that has come up to visit us here in studio. Josh Holmes from Midwinter Games is going to join me right here. But first, we have a rundown to get to, of course, and this one is going out to the guy in the shades, Corey Hart. Hey, Vic, you guys rock. Watch you on the daily, and we'll come by Vancouver sometime. Best info show I know. Thank you so much, the guy in shades. This rundown is all yours. Now, EA is hoping that gamers are feeling the need for speed once again. The publisher has announced Need for Speed Heat, the latest entry in their long-running racing franchise. This time around, developer Ghost Games is introducing a sort of duality to the gameplay. During the day, you'll compete in legal races to earn money and customize your cars, but at night, you'll compete in underground races that will not only pit you against other drivers, but the cops as well. Thankfully, the dev team promises that the car customization will be a big improvement over the last game, which received negative reviews, although we still don't know if there will be any microtransactions or loot box mechanics. Need for Speed Heat arrives on November 8th. Now, this is developed by Ghost Games out in Sweden, and they've done some phenomenal work with the production values on their Need for Speed games so far. This is a vaunted franchise for EA, and I think it's incredibly important that they get this one right. Hopefully, it isn't loaded with too many microtransactions or loot boxes or things that are going to, put a negative spin on this. I think it's important that we have some daytime races. I think it's important that we get chased by cops. I think the Hot Pursuit games and the Need for Speed franchise have been maybe not the biggest sellers, but I think the most critically praised. And if this is a return to that form, I think this is going to be great. I honestly feel like Ghost Games has put the ingredients together to build something really phenomenal and really forward sort of thinking with the Need for Speed franchise. The absence has been good for this brand. I think that people are ready to see what's next and what's new. I just hope that they don't drop the ball. I think the technology is there to build us something really cool. I'm super excited about this. I'm glad to see Need for Speed back. I just want it to feel super fun and super accessible, and I don't want to feel like the hand is out for you pay us for this, pay us for that. I don't want to see any of that stuff, and I want to get chased by cops and have a great time, and I want it to look pretty. So my fingers are crossed. We're going to learn more very soon because there's going to be new information at Gamescom, and the game is coming out in the fall, so let's keep our fingers crossed that it's awesome. Now, after being split apart, two of the biggest names in media are coming back together, and it's not because of a transporter malfunction. Star Trek TV owner CBS and Star Trek movie owner Viacom have officially announced their long-rumored merger. The two companies actually used to be one, but split back in 2005, causing problems for franchises like Star Trek, with half of the rights to the franchise owned by one and the rest owned by the other. Now that everything is back under one roof, it makes it easier for transmedia entities. That means we could expect to see even more Star Trek going forward. And I think that this probably was precipitated by the warm reception that Star Trek has had recently. I don't know if this is the magic ingredient there that got all of this stuff to move forward. Certainly, there's lots of properties under this huge umbrella here. But I think Star Trek fans could potentially be the big winners here as long as everybody plays nice, starts to put the right projects together. I know that Blake is still shaking his head because he's not a fan of Discovery. But we do have good things in the works. That Picard show looks amazing, and they're doing some animated stuff. And clearly, Star Trek is important. And clearly, Marvel and Disney have kind of shown that if you pay the due respects to your properties like they have with Marvel and to some extent the Star Wars stuff, you can have crossovers in a bunch of different directions, and you can try to build your brand and your lore in lots of really interesting ways. And who knows, man? Maybe this is the way that we get our road to the Quentin Tarantino Star Trek, which would be insane. But I think this makes it a lot easier for sort of mixing the universes and sort of keeping everything straight. You know, the one thing that they don't have with Star Trek is that Kevin Feige type that is sort of leading the whole thing, you know, or even the George Lucas or the Star Wars Storyteller Group or whatever. Now it's all going to be overseen, presumably, by one entity out there. So we'll see. They can certainly screw it up. Star Trek has been screwed up before, so we'll see. Hopefully this is going to be a good thing for the movies and the upcoming TV shows. Now, it's official. 3 big game franchises are coming back from the dead. THQ Nordic has revealed that they're currently working on new Saints Row and Time Splitters games, and also confirmed rumors that the troubled zombie game Dead Island 2 has been uncanceled and is being made by a new developer, Dambuster Studios. This is welcome news for fans. THQ Nordic, also known as Nordic Games, bought the rights to Saints Row and Time Splitters from the former THQ Inc., which went bankrupt in 2013, so fans have been holding their breath for something new. Dead Island 2 is a little more complicated. It has been stuck in development hell for years, and when THQ Nordic bought publisher Deep Silver last year, they handed it off to the new developers. Hopefully, they're able to give it new life. Wasn't Dambusters the studio behind that Homefront 2? Did they bring that back? It was, yeah, it was, and that was plagued with a lot of issues. It had a very, very bumpy launch, and it looked like it was going to be really cool. I love that THQ Nordic is trying these different ways to bring back franchises that meant so much to the games industry. I think that's great. I think that their sort of double-A approach is leading to some very interesting releases and re-releases. I think the game that has got me the most excited, I can't say, honestly, that I'm excited about a Dead Island 2 game. I can barely remember the first one. And when I saw the Dead Island 2 in the news, I was like, didn't that come out? But no, it just was stuck forever. So I'm not super psyched about that. Saints Row, I think, had a nice, healthy, long run, and it's almost nice to kind of look back in retrospect at some of those games that sort of seemed like they petered out, although good releases in there. But Time Splitters, hell yes. Very excited about that, especially if some of the original people that worked on that game are back and they want to, you know, kind of, they could not only just play with that time dynamic, but they could play with the way that games evolved in first person through the eras and, you know, make it kind of like this is a first person shooter game from 1995, this is a first person shooter game from 2022, and have a whole bunch of interesting gameplay scenarios playing with that time dynamic in there as well. Very clever, very creative bunch. Those Time Splitters games were, I think, ahead of their time, but they were super fun, and I think it's been, for people that were around, you know, feverishly playing all of those games back then, it's been very sad to see an amazing franchise like that with all of this potential just sort of go poof and disappear into the ether. So I'm very happy that THQ Nordic is seeing value in titles like that and saying, yep, we got to bring that back. So good on you, THQ Nordic. Hopefully, you know, these titles live up to their promise and their potential, and we will see some good games out of all this. All right, you guys, that's going to do it for our rundown. Right now, it's time to take a look at this day in everything cool. Welcome to This Day in Everything Cool for August 14th. On this day in 1989, Sega shaped a whole new console generation in their image. The Sega Genesis launched in North America following its debut in Japan the previous year, where it was known as the Sega Mega Drive. The Genesis, or Mega Drive, was Sega's third console and their first to offer 16-bit graphics. The hardware was designed by Sega's own internal R&D team and was actually modeled after one of the company's latest arcade system boards, which meant that the Genesis could support video and audio comparable to arcade games. As for games, the Genesis launched in North America with only a handful of titles, including Altered Beast and Alex Kidd in the Enchanted Castle, and it wasn't until 2 years later that the Genesis got its most famous game, Sonic the Hedgehog. The Genesis was a big success, but it failed to match the popularity of Nintendo's own 16-bit console, the SNES, which was released a year later. Sega created several add-ons for the system, most notably the Sega CD in 1991, which played CD-ROM games and offered full-motion video. The Genesis was followed by the Sega Saturn in 1994. The Sega Genesis came out today, 30 years ago. Incredible. We're going to be looking at the Sega Genesis Mini later on in this show. I told you this was an epic show. One other thing that we're going to do right now as well is I've got a 4K copy. What's going on?
The camera's not great for that.
Oh, wait. Can you show me? Do it later? Oh, okay. Okay. Blake is telling me to do it later. Okay, I'll put it right there. Okay, Bad Vic. Okay. All right, we're moving on to we are going to have an incredible guest on stage with us right now. Please join me in welcoming Josh Holmes from Midwinter Games. Come on up, Josh. Good to see you.
Hey, man.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Very good. Very good. That's live internet streaming.
All right.
All right, but it gets cut up and chopped up into nice little tasty morsels. Josh Holmes is here, everybody. And I want to, first of all, thank you very much for coming up all this way from Seattle. You drove up to be on the show today.
Yeah, my pleasure. I mean, anytime I get a chance to come home, it's great.
That's awesome. Yeah, you are from the Vancouver area.
I am.
And you had a nice long run as a game maker here in Vancouver.
Yep.
Was this your first time ever making video games? Was in this city?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Started in Burnaby in the mid-'90s. Yeah.
At Electronic Arts.
At Electronic Arts.
The company that shall not be named.
Yeah. It's been a rough couple of years for them, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think anybody that's been around EA over time, and certainly that applies to you and to me, our hearts are breaking a little bit because it's a beautiful company that is just, it feels like it's just trying to shake off some stuff.
Yeah, it's funny because, I mean, for me, growing up in EA, like, I'll always have a piece of my soul that's connected to that company.
Yeah.
Like, I was there for 10 years, first 10 years of my career.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
Well, let's dig into your past, your history a little bit. What was the first stuff that you got your hands on, that you got to work on?
So, I mean, when I first started in games, the way I started was I literally wrote a letter to anyone that would read it at EA, and because somebody had told me that, hey, there's a game company here in Vancouver where you live, and I happened to be playing a bunch of their sports games, and I was like, holy cow, this is amazing. So I wrote them a letter, and I said, like, I will literally do anything. I want to make games. I grew up, designing games, board games, playing role-playing games. Like, games are my life. They're in my DNA. What do I have to do? And they brought me in for an interview, and they basically said, hey, we hire attitude, not skills, for QA, right? And we'll bring you aboard for a test position, and then it's up to you. Like, you do whatever you're going to do. And we started, and that was the summer of '95, and they brought in 100 people, and they said, something like 25 of you are going to have jobs after this summer is over. So it's down to whoever wants it more, whoever works harder, and we killed ourselves for that couple of months. And at the end of that, there was a really great core group left at EA in test that has gone on to do all kinds of stuff across the industry. Because once we got in, then it was all about, like, okay, how do we work our way into production? How do we find any gig that we can do that's actually making the games, not just testing the games?
That's awesome. You were talking about some of those guys like Gio Corsi, who used to work with you at Propaganda, who's now at PlayStation, and Adam Boyes was part of that group who left PlayStation, but
now he's at Iron Galaxy. Yeah,
that's awesome. Do you keep in touch with that group of 25?
We do. Yeah. We keep in touch. John Dowdswell, he's another great guy. It's cool to have, like, a network of people that you've known for literally decades that have worked in all different aspects of the industry, and being able to draw on that. If I have a question about something that maybe I don't have the answer to, I can go out and reach out to one of those guys. And,
well, congratulations on 25 years.
Thanks,
man.
Wow,
25 years making video games. That's how long I've been doing it too. That summer was a very important summer for me. I went to E3 for the very first time, and I actually went to EA. They were the first company that I kind of had to convince that this show was coming, and I met with Paul Lee, who was running the company then, and he offered me a job at EA, and I said, no, I'm trying to interview the people that make video games.
It seems like it turned out pretty well for you.
It turned out pretty good, yes. Yeah. But I've always felt that it was incredibly important to get into the studios to, shine the spotlight on who you guys are and the passions that you had. And you talked about starting as a tester and working your way into the machine, the system of EA, and that worked for you. Is it still that way 25 years later? Can you still go from being a QA person to eventually working as a designer?
I think so. I mean, some of the things have changed. Obviously, there's more professional training that's available today, and so expectations might be a little higher in terms of what someone brings into the workforce. But at the same time, the thing that's lowered is, you have engines like Unreal and Unity that make it easier than ever for somebody to have an idea, go out there and sort of just put that idea into practice and create a prototype or an experience that can kind of showcase their talent. And that, when I started, that wasn't really the case. If you wanted to do something, if you wanted to build a game, unless you were a programming wizard, you were kind of out in the dark a little bit and really limited in terms of what you could build.
Right.
So part of what led me to want to go and work at EA and what was so exciting to me when I joined my first development team was being able to couple my creative energy with these incredible programmers and artists and everybody that had these skills that I didn't have. And being able to kind of work together to create something was really special. But I think people can totally do that today, and I see, really it just comes down to drive. It's like, how much do you want it, and don't let anybody deter you.
There's almost less rules now than there was then, and because there's more ways to reach people. It's like television. Like everything is different now. There's just so many digital streams that you can come out with anything, any art.
And it's like technology has kind of democratized the whole thing and removed a bunch of different barriers, and
it's kind of amazing, but scary fantastic. Too, right? Like I don't envy people that are trying to carve their own path and trying to figure out which way to go right now.
Yeah, I mean, to some degree, when there's like a very established sort of one or two avenues for you to pursue whatever your goal might be, then it makes things a little bit easier to focus. Like, okay, well, this is the path I have to take.
Yeah.
And maybe there's some rules to be broken along the way, or some, shortcuts that you can sort of forge on your own. But for the most part, it's kind of, this is the one way to do it. And I guess the downside of where we are today is, like, there's no one way to do it. There's like literally infinite different ways you can do it. And that can, I imagine, be a little overwhelming.
Yeah. We talked about EA in the rundown today with the new Need for Speed game that's coming out. And of course, Need for Speed was invented at EA Canada.
Yep.
Was that one of the titles that you tested?
I tested it. I tested it. I never actually worked on
the original Need for Speed? You tested
it? I can't remember. It was on the 3DO. So
that's unbelievable.
Yeah, I tested it for probably like 2 weeks.
Because it came out then. It came out in '95.
Totally, yeah. And they needed to throw some extra testers on there to make sure things were going well. But
that's amazing. So talk to me about your rise at EA and what EA was like, because it was a studio and a studio sensibility that able to work on any kind of game. And then in the 90s, it really became the sports shop.
Yeah, it was all about sports. Like when I got there, everything that EA Canada did was sports. And I mean, you could say Need for Speed, but that's sort of a sport. Like at least it's attached in some way, I guess.
Yep.
The rise for me, like I remember, so there's a guy named Shan Kong who, a great friend of mine, runs a studio in town, Skybox. He and I were in QA together, and I remember we created a pitch for an RTS game because RTS was huge at the time, and it was called Cabal. And we worked on it we would do our 14-hour testing shift every day, and then we would sit there at work and work for another 5 hours, coming up with ideas and typing them out. We would split the design doc into different parts that each of us would take on. And we managed to get a pitch session with an EP, Steve Reckschaffner, at EA, and we pitched him our game, and he was like, yeah, guys, I'm not really into RTSs, so I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not making this game, but keep doing what you're doing, and the passion is awesome. So that was kind of like the first attempt to try to break in that way, and then I was just lucky enough to go out for an assistant producer role on the NBA team, but they were also the golf game team, the PGA team. So like my first game that I actually worked on in production was PGA Tour something, 98, 97 maybe, because they were always 1 year ahead. So.
Which speaks to the blur that you guys were working in too, right? Like it's hard to differentiate from 1 year to the next because you're moving so fast.
Everything was so quick. Yeah. And this is what I was saying to you before the show today. Like one of the great benefits of coming up in a sports game system is that you have this rigor that gets applied to everything that you do. You're on a timetable. Guess what? The next one's coming out next year on this specific date. So you've got a couple of months to talk about what are the big features we want to do. You've got a couple of months to do some pre-production on how are we going to build that stuff. Then you're going to build it. Then you're going to launch it, and then you're going to do it all over again.
That's awesome.
And there's no like, oh, well, maybe we could slip this an extra 5 months or so. Like that just didn't happen. Not at that point. So what that did when you're starting out building games is you get to practice. You get to practice your craft. You get to learn what it means to make decisions quickly, to bring teams of people together to consensus, to be like, okay, this is the solution that we're going to employ. Because there's just no time. And even like when I think about some of the later games that I worked on with one of my current partners in our current studio, Daryl Anselmo, he and I worked on NBA Street, and then we worked on the Def Jam series, the first couple. Like the first Def Jam game,
amazing
we
games.
did that game in 8 months.
Wow.
They already had an engine. They had some wrestling stuff going on, but like it was 8 months from the point that we were dropped on and we were told like, go come up with a creative, build a game. You got to ship a game, to the point that we shipped it.
And was that a licensing first deal? Was that EA and Def Jam had come up and we want to work together?
No, it was way weirder than that.
Yeah.
It was so. EA had secured, Paul Lee was actually the guy.
Yeah.
He had secured the WCW license.
Okay.
And he had secured Aki Corp, which is a legendary wrestling developer based in Japan.
Yep.
And he had said, okay, this is it. This is how we're going to win, right? We're going to take WCW, we're going to take Aki, we're going to go after the WWF at that point.
Was it THQ?
THQ.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Which was also in the news today. It's all full circle today.
So, yeah. and then WWF bought WCW and said, like, sorry, you don't have that license anymore. And they were like, oh, crap, like, what are we going to do?
So you guys were already far along with this engine and the whole wrestling thing. Wow.
So by the time we weren't part of this project at this point, but by the time we were added to the project, they were like, we need to do something with this awesome developer.
Yeah.
We have no license. The team that's on it right now is working on like intergalactic wrestling with like magma creatures on a volcano planet. We're really worried.
I do want to see that game. No, that sounds amazing.
It was amazing. And so we got in a brainstorming session, and we came up with this idea for, we just come off of NBA Streets. We were like really into hip hop culture.
Yep.
And we were like, oh, what if we got hip hop stars and they were fighting? And someone was like, oh, that's amazing. I know Def Jam. We can put that. And they're like, this is a great idea. And we're like, no, this is a terrible idea. We should like not make this game. This game will go nowhere. And they're like, no, this is the game. You guys are making this game.
So Brass was like saying that
you
got to make it, and you guys were like, no, don't do it.
Yeah, as I recall correctly, they basically decided this is the game that the team that is on it now is going to make. And we're like, oh man, I feel so bad for that team, because we pretty much just gave them that terrible game idea that they now have to do something with. And then the next week they're like, hey, we're pulling you off your projects. You guys are making this game now.
No.
And we're just like, but
you did it. You made a classic, man.
We did. And it just became about like, how do we create a world and a fiction where this could actually exist?
Well, and that's a huge part of great games sometimes too, is this accidental stumbling into some genius kind of concepts,
Yeah.
And the first game was good, but Fight for New York was a whole other level.
Well, that was a game where we actually had some extra time. So I think that game had a whopping 14-month development cycle. It might have even been 15 months.
Yeah.
Wow. But,
like
that game is one where I'm really proud of what we achieved, because it was kind of the culmination of our vision for what we would have wanted the first game to be.
Right.
And to this day, I still have people that hit me up on Twitter and send me, like, when are you going to make another Def Jam game? And I'm like, well, it's a little complicated.
It is a complicated thing.
But, yeah.
And, were the rights, we were talking with Mike Micah the other day, and there's a lot of issues with license stuff because the rights aren't always kept up with in perpetuity. Or
that game is an impossibility. It is
sucks.
Like the fact that those games got made is absolutely amazing, because you had EA, you had Aki in Japan, we had a team here in Vancouver that we built up that built half the game.
Yep.
You had Def Jam in New York. You had all of the individual artists and celebrities and their representation. You had rights for all the music. All of this stuff
none of
had
it
to
was
be
probably wrapped up in a you can publish this forever thing, right?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think there were like limitations on all of the rights.
So the only way that people can play it is to go and track down old hardware and physical media
Yeah.
And are these
Backward
things
compatibility.
Are they
going to
become super big collector items then?
I hope so, because I have a whole bunch at my house. I have a box at my house, so yeah.
I think they're going to be worth a lot of money, honestly. I really do. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And so they obviously sold well.
Yeah, they sold really well, and they went on to make Def Jam Icon, which we had left EA at that point, and that was Kudo Tsunoda, who I then later worked with, sort of worked in the same company at Microsoft when I went there for Halo.
Right on, yeah. And Kudo, because he was in Chicago, right? Working on Fight Night and all of that stuff.
Exactly.
Okay, interesting.
So they're like, oh, we'll take the Fight Night team, we'll put them on the Def Jam game series.
Awesome. Well, before that, you partnered with Disney.
Yep.
And Disney has this on-off kind of relationship with making video games.
Yep.
They make them for a while, then they stop.
Yeah, we're making video games internally. No, now we're only licensing. No, now we're making them internally. Yeah.
And John Drake just went over there from Sony, which is awesome. I hope that leads to some really cool things.
Maybe that's a whole, another
I hope
run
so.
at the cycle.
Why not, right?
Yeah.
Well, you had a nice long run with Propaganda, and you brought us Turok, and that's why we had met each other, I think, when you were the person that we would interview about the Def Jam titles, but then you ran your own studio with Propaganda.
Yeah.
And what was that experience like? Turok was something that you brought back to fore, which is a weird fit for Disney, but it was your game.
It was an amazing experience and a lot of learning. We built that studio. So originally when we started Propaganda, we had an original IP that we were building, and we started working with Disney as a publishing partner for that game. And then they sort of said to us, hey, we're going to build up these internal studios. Why don't we acquire you and you become part of Disney Interactive? We're going to make this big push, and we want the Miramax of gaming, this like, mature rated gaming division, and you guys can be at the center of it. We're like, sounds great. And then they said, hey, we have the license to Turok, and we need someone to build it. Would you guys be interested in pitching that? And we're like, oh man, we're such fans of the original Turok games.
Yeah, they were pretty damn cool, right?
So we put a pitch together. They were really excited. They were like, okay, we want to place this game with you. We joined forces with them. And then we discovered they had the license to the original comic book, not the game. So suddenly, like, all of the things that people
licensing,
want.
Man.
Oh, man. People were like, oh, you're going to have the Cerebral Bore, right? And we're like, we don't have the rights to Cerebral Bore. But we were told, you can't let anybody know this because we want Turok to, have the brand affinity that people have. So we basically built a new IP, Turok, that was inspired by the comic book series. And I'm really proud of what we did, but, we made a ton of mistakes. It's crazy what we took on. Brand new studio, had never built a shooter before, built it for next-gen platforms as our first kick at the can.
That's right.
So we shipped that game. It was the most successful game Disney Interactive had at the time.
Yeah.
And then I left shortly thereafter to go down to Seattle and work on Halo.
And so was that a thing where Halo was transitioning to Microsoft and they were looking for the right creative lead that had some first-person shooter experience, or did you know people there?
Yeah, I didn't know many people there. Like, I had worked with Don in the past at EA.
Right.
He had been the GM when I was at that studio.
Don Matrick, we're talking
John
about.
Matrick.
Yeah.
And John Shepard, I think, was there as well. And I'd worked with, he had also been the GM at EA.
It was like
there.
the EA era of Microsoft for a while.
It was, yeah. And so so I knew a couple people, but I met Phil for the first time, and I met Bonnie. And it was in those initial conversations that I met Ken Lobb for the first time, and I was just kind of like,
legend, yes.
Ken Lobb.
Yeah.
And it was in those initial conversations that they were like, well, here's a bunch of stuff that we think you could potentially be awesome at working on. And it was like, nothing really fit. And then they mentioned Halo, and Halo was such a huge inspiration to me as a designer.
Yeah.
And it was the thing that, alongside Doom, those were the two things that inspired me to just love shooters more than any other form of game. So, and I started talking to the team there, and they were building a studio. And so I agreed to come down and move my family and take a flyer on 343, and it was just an amazing experience.
Was there ever a moment of self-doubt around that, because this was like a massive scale thing, first party from Microsoft? It was just such an important. You couldn't screw it up, really. You had to go out there and.
Absolutely. But I mean, like, one of the things for me that I really thrive in an environment where someone says, you can't possibly do this thing. Like, this is impossible. You'll never pull it off. And at that time, everyone, at least in the industry, you know, I can't remember whether publicly, like, whether Halo fans were like, oh, they'll never pull it off. But certainly, like, all of my industry friends were like, you guys are crazy.
Yeah.
You can't possibly pull this off. You'll never fill Bungie's shoes. This is a lose-lose all across the board. You're going to be part of one of the biggest debacles that has ever happened in gaming. And that was sort of like the whole backstory for us on Halo 4 was sort of rising to meet the challenge and overcome these super long odds on being able to do this thing. And to this day, it's another one of those things where I look back and I'm like, wow, it's crazy that we were able to pull it off. We wouldn't have been able to pull it off without all of the amazing support that we had from Microsoft, obviously, and Phil and all these folks. And we had just such an incredible team and just an amazing bunch of talent that came together out of their love for Halo to try and build this thing.
And you guys did pull it off, by the way. I remember loving Halo 4, and I thought Halo 5 was pretty damn fun as well. I'm looking forward to whatever 343 has got cooking with the new one. Yeah. But did you stay for Halo 5? Or part of it? Or?
Yeah. So 4, I was the creative director. Halo 5, I was the studio head for the shooter team, working on that. And Tim Longo came in and took over as creative director on 5. And then after 5, at the end of 2016, that was when I decided that it was time for me to leave and go and build something new and very different.
Yeah, and that, again, must have been kind of a nerve-wracking idea, because you've basically been handed the keys to the kingdom and all the assets and all of the people that you could ever need to build a game as big as you could dream, probably. But you said, nah.
Yeah, at the time it was like, okay, you're crazy. And I had conversations with my wife, who has been such just my support, through everything I've done.
Yep.
And similar to when we made the decision to move from our hometown and go down to Seattle, she was just super supportive and said, hey, if this is what you want to do, you should do it. And I know it seems crazy, but like your heart's telling you that this is the thing to do. Follow your heart. And I can just say, like, in my career, I've gone through a bunch of different successful games. I've been really fortunate to have the chance to work on those. But I've always had this pull to not want to keep sort of sequeling the same thing.
Sure.
I want to go and like have a new adventure, learn something new, and take on some new challenge. And so, I'd shipped Halo 4. We had overcome incredible odds to deliver that game. The game had been successful. Then I took on Halo 5, the shoes of leading the team, and we shipped that game, and we kind of transitioned into this service mentality of like continuing to support the game once it went live.
Yep.
And then I was like, okay, well, what's next for me? And I want to do something different, and that's what led to the founding of Midwinter with 3 of my best friends.
When did that take place? When did you guys put Midwinter together?
December 2016 was when we officially founded the company. 3 of the 4 founders, we had worked together on Halo.
Yeah.
So we left Halo at the end of November, and then our 4th founder is someone who was a co-founder for Propaganda, also someone I worked with throughout my whole career at EA. We built Street together. We built the Def Jam games together.
Awesome.
So we all came together. We said, hey, what do we want to do? What's the sort of studio we want to build? What's the kind of culture we want to build? We knew we wanted to get away from this sort of massive scale AAA, hundreds of people bumping into each other, trying to make decisions that take sometimes weeks to kind of navigate through the production infrastructure of a large scale studio, which is like just a necessity of working at that scale. Things are much slower, and just get back to the joy of like, let's get in a room, let's make some games together, and let's just be really passionate about what we're building. And so we actually started the company in the living room of my house. We spent a year there. We we added a couple team members. We had Risa, who joined us as our lead character artist, and then Jimmy joined us in Stockholm. So he's someone that had worked. He's at DICE before. He's at Pandemic. Had worked with Fita before, who's one of my co-founders. And we just started assembling this team, and starting to build Midwinter, and then talking about, okay, what's the first game? And the first game became Scavengers, which is the game that we're working on now.
So that's cool. So you started the company first before you really kind of zeroed in on the idea. So because it is kind of like you're jumping without a parachute in a way, right?
Yep.
Because if you don't have what your project is going to be, you don't know what you're going to go and sell. But that speaks to, I think, a general kind of feeling around the industry, because I hear this again from a lot of veteran devs. They have the experience of working in a big studio, they learn a lot there, but then they want to take on the idea of building a new sort of corporate structure or corporate philosophy, and it sounds like that's what you started with.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the experience of having built Propaganda, what it taught me was, that was a studio that we built initially around that first new IP that we wanted to build. And we were in such a rush to just be like, let's build a team, let's get everybody together, and let's go build a game. And we didn't stop and think about, okay, what is the sort of team that we want to build? What are the values we want to be at the core of what we're doing?
Right.
And what are, let that inform the games that we build as a team instead of the other way around. Because ultimately, and this happened at Propaganda, and I think to some degree at 343, where you are so engaged in that process of building the team and building the game that it's not until you get to a certain size that you suddenly go, oh crap, okay, now what do we want our values to be? Like, what do we stand for, and how do we want to operate as a team? And it's really hard to come back and retrofit culture after.
Right.
So we started with, what's the culture we want to build? We know that we'll be able to build cool games if we get the right people and we get the right culture. So we started with that first.
That's awesome. And so the first game is Scavengers.
Yes.
And give us the log line.
Yeah. So, I mean, we were really focused on wanting to build multiplayer experiences that bring players together.
Mm-hmm.
And so Scavengers is a session-based multiplayer game. It's something we call a co-opetition, which is a BS made-up word. But, like, basically...
It's a good word.
We have some love for it, and some, there's also some disagreement. But that's fine. But it's basically like, the combination of cooperation and competition of PvEVP, where players need to work together to survive and to succeed, but PvP and conflict and competition is always a part of the experience, or it can be. And so one of the things that's really unique about Scavengers is, within each session, it's a team-based game. Players are part of a 3-person team, and there are multiple teams that drop down into a large open world environment that's sort of this winterized post-apoc Earth after the moon is shattered and the Earth has been thrust into this new ice age. So all these teams drop in.
Which could be the news every day.
Tune in. Tune in 20 years from now. We'll see how we're doing as a species. But the unique thing is that all of those teams have a shared objective. And so as a team, you only succeed if we all accomplish that objective together. And that objective is large enough that no individual team can accomplish it on its own. So we start each session sort of working together, but at the same time, we are being individually rewarded based on our contributions and what we achieve and what we bring out of the session as a team, what score we contribute. And so there's this constant tension of like, okay, well, we need to play nice for some amount of time, and if we become too aggressive and try to eliminate one another for personal gain, then we will all fail. But at what point does it become safe for me to try to murder you and take your stuff?
Right.
And so that leads to some really interesting and very different outcomes from session to session. And like philosophically, what we get really excited about as a team is we're trying to create complex systems that sort of work on one another and then give players tools to poke at those systems and play with them. And what we get excited about is the player stories that come out of that. Like, we have all of these different experiences, all these different sessions that have very different distinct player stories.
Sure.
That are really memorable because of all of the chaos and challenge that you're having to face and deal with as a team.
That's awesome. So you're playing as a team, and you're facing other live teams as well. Have
Yes.
you guys got a total count of how many people might be in a?
We're still playing with total
Okay.
count. Like right now, we're right around 36, but we're pushing that up to 45, and we're going to see how far we can push it. Like
Yeah.
So one of the things we did early on is we formed a partnership with a company called Improbable. It's based in the UK,
Yep.
and they have a technology called Spatial OS that allows you to go beyond the limitations of a single server.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really important for us because we have this complex world that is filled with AI and sort of living systems, and at the same time has a high player count. And we wanted to have the ability to scale that virtually limitlessly over time. Like,
Right.
so we can continue to evolve the session size and not have to sort of put a stake in the ground and say, well, this will only be a 24-person
Right.
game experience, or it'll only be a 50-person game experience.
It can also give you more geography, I would imagine, right?
Exactly,
So
yeah.
you could be in Alaska, post-apocalyptic, and then you're
Just
going to go
expand
into
the boundaries of the
northern
world
BC
over
and
time.
Northwest Territories. That's amazing. Have you
Yeah.
guys got a date, or when people can start to play this game yet? Or
So right now we're in closed play tests. We're pre-alpha in terms of our development cycle. So we've been doing friends and family play tests. We have started to bring our community into play tests.
Mm-hmm.
We just had one on the weekend, which was awesome. And it's been really rewarding for the team to have the community join in, and it's been such a positive community so far. And we're just going to continue to run those play tests and use that as a way to hone and improve the game. As far as like a specific release date, we haven't settled on one yet. It'll be sometime next year, could be next year, could be late next year. We're going to kind of figure that out based on when we feel the game is ready.
Awesome. And it will be free?
It's a free-to-play game.
Okay,
Yeah.
and it will be live.
Yep.
Are you guys concerned at all of just having to stay with one game for years and years and years? That seems to be the case when you have a huge success. You got to stay with it forever.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great problem to have.
Yeah.
I don't think we're concerned about it because we see so many opportunities to keep evolving and adding new features, new modes of play, new challenges to the game experience.
Yep.
And we want the world to just continue to evolve and grow in an organic, sort of natural way.
You've been at the studios that were, your teams were probably around 20 people at EA, and then you got into the 50s, 60s with Propaganda, into the hundreds with 343.
A little bigger on all that. So
Yeah.
I think at EA, when I first started, the teams were probably 40 people.
Okay.
Propaganda, our team on Turok probably topped out around 110. At 343, when I left, our team was like 400 people-ish. And I think they've continued to grow with the aspirations of Infinite. For us, we are a team, most of last year was spent building the team, going from roughly 6 people to about 25 by the end of the year.
Yep.
We're about 32 right now, and we're pretty much at, we might add a couple more people, but we're pretty filled out at this point.
Is that the sweet spot for you, or do you want to get it to a like 50, 60?
I love where we are.
Yeah.
I think we sweat every time we decide that we're going to add someone to the team, because we love the fact that, every day we're all there together talking about what we're building, debating and discussing, different aspects of the game, playing the game together and making decisions as a team. And I mean, I've worked with a lot of incredible teams in my career. This is just the greatest team experience I've ever had. Like I come into work every day with a giant smile on my face, inspired and energized by the people I work with across, and they represent like people who have decades of experience and people who are literally, this is their first professional game development gig. But what they all share is this incredible passion, incredible creativity, and everyone's got this grit and determination and work ethic that we just want to make great stuff,
That is awesome. I am so happy for you, my friend.
Thanks.
That is incredible.
Thanks, dude.
Josh Holmes, he's running Midwinter Games, and pretty soon you'll be able to play Scavengers. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Happy 25 years. All right. We have got a look at a whole other game that's being made right now in Dallas and various cities around the world. Here's a look at the writing that's going into Borderlands 3.
What is up, brothers and sisters? God Queen Tyrene coming to you live. We got something real special for you today.
A Borderlands game combines fast-paced shooting and RPG loot systems with a pretty unique sense of humor. We're just exploring this wild sci-fi world where everyone's just trying to survive. We're just blowing the hell out of everything.
On Pandora, it's actually super weird if something's not exploding.
The core of the world is that these corporations have basically taken over the role of governments, and they're these massive arms manufacturers. So it's a very dark world that we live in. But the characters you meet are colorful, they're full of life, and they're kind of survivors. And no matter where you go in the Borderlands universe, you have that kind of dynamic. It's like a humor of catharsis where you can't help but laugh because the world is kind of a very challenging place to live in.
I can dance and sing, and some guns now include an alternate shooting mode.
Humor can be very subjective, but after a gameplay reveal event, hearing fans say, "Oh man, this is the humor we know and love," and falling in love with characters like Lorelei, who is a new character for the series, that's the most rewarding thing. It's just, as a writer, you want people to just love your characters and to want to hear more from them.
All right, let's get to it.
Our fans are super dedicated to the franchise, and I count myself as one of them. I had played every single piece of Borderlands content way before I ever stepped foot into Gearbox Software. All the time, I would be reading scripts, hearing new dialogue that we'd recorded, and asking myself, is this what I want as a fan? And I think the result kind of speaks for itself.
Yo! Little help?
There's some new characters that I'm so curious what fans are going to think of. There's wonderful, beloved characters in the franchise like Ellie and Claptrap that, they're just great.
Oh, howdy!
Yeah, there's a few characters that I think people are going to really like, and I'm just so curious how they'll respond.
At this point, I'd settle for anyone who doesn't run.
The Borderlands universe, anyone can exist in this universe, and the commonality is when you meet someone in the Borderlands universe, they've got an interesting story to tell, because how the heck do you survive in a place like this? There have been times when a concept artist will come with just an image and be like, "Hey, what do you think of this character?" And we're that's amazing. We just start writing scripts based on that. Sometimes we'll collaborate with mission designers and kind of build a mission collaboratively. Other times we'll write a script and go, "Hey, shouldn't this be a mission? This sounds pretty cool, right?" And then you'll have to pitch it to various members of the team and kind of get people to be excited about it too.
Which would be awesome!
How vocal both the enemies and the player characters are during battle. They'll be, saying one-liners and slinging quips at each other.
Feel my holy faith!
That is a huge portion of the amount of writing that we end up doing for the game, and so that's where a lot of the character of the universe comes from. Whether it's a character like the Psycho, who is just screaming word salad, but there's definitely a darkness behind that, or if it's a character like Amara, where she clearly is always been the strongest person that she's ever met, and she's never really lost a fight, and so that comes off in the brashness and toughness of the stuff that she yells out. It's really fun to explore that world through those lines.
Get back here, coward!
Working with the actors that we have is one of the joys of being a writer on this franchise. We have actors who have been with us since Borderlands 1. They bring a lot of wisdom and humor and insight to the characters that really makes it less of us writing and more of kind of a collaboration.
This'll have to do for now.
As often as possible, we wanted to start the first session with any character on site. We have a recording studio at Gearbox, and so we would bring in an actor and talk to them about their role in the game and show them some concept art and just, either get them up to speed on the Borderlands universe or tell them, what we're doing in Borderlands 3. And from there is a very collaborative process. We have an incredible VO director, Joel McDonald, who has helped us to cast some pretty tricky parts. He's a veteran of the VO industry, and he's been so helpful.
That's what I've been saying!
We know we've succeeded when we can cast a character and have the actor start ad-libbing as that character and bring life into them. The player characters, I think, are a huge success in Borderlands 3. Just to throw out Kean Barry as Zane, his offhand Irish culturalism that he throws into his lines are just hilarious.
You're the only one who understands me!
Some of the funniest things in this game we didn't write, and that's a shame.
People always do what you tell them to.
When you're playing a game that you defeat a character and their last line is, "My chili recipe dies with me," you know you're playing something special. Collaborating with so many developers of different disciplines is like a really rewarding way to think about characters and stories. Like you learn a lot from a concept artist or a designer when you sit down to like brainstorm a new character or like collaborate on a new mission, and it makes you kind of retool your mind in terms of like how do you tell an interactive story and like what cool opportunities are you not thinking of that someone else can kind of provide.
I can only speak for myself, but I adore working with Danny. We have very different styles, both in terms of how we write and the kind of stuff that we intake. And so finding what Danny's sense of humor was and how mine interplayed with his was one of the most daunting challenges of writing the game, but also the most rewarding.
Mediocre.
Nice. Correct.
The general rule is if you try to make someone laugh, the collaboration becomes like amazing and really fun. And you know, like Sam said, we have different senses of humor and different characters that we gravitate towards. And a lot of the magic of Borderlands is this kind of strange mix of a lot of different creative people coming together to make this universe.
Navigate it, bitches!
There's so many creative individuals of varying disciplines, and the creative ideas that just seem the most interesting often end up winning. So like, we might be writers, but we might have an idea for a design that ends up being part of the game, or a character artist might say, hey, this would be an interesting plot to do, and then suddenly that makes its way into the game as well. It's a very collaborative environment.
Sounds like a bunch of dumbass, if you ask me.
This is not the last Borderlands game, just to make some news right now. Borderlands is an amazing franchise, and we'll have some DLCs to look forward to, and probably future games in the series.
I obviously won't pass up a chance to study a new vault.
Beyond the base game, we have the season pass of DLC. That's 4 major story-based campaign DLCs, very similar to what BL2 did, just really interesting, distinct stories.
This isn't over yet.
There's some absolutely buck wild moments in this game, and I can't wait for people to experience them. I think when it releases, I'm just going to be on Twitch, just like watching people's live reactions to certain things, because, you know, they sounded like a good idea a year and a half ago. Let's see if it's paid off. I think that they have, but we'll see.
I'll pre-order your tombstone just in case.
All right, I've got some thoughts on Borderlands 3, and I'm going to share them with you in a second. But first, I have to tell you that Michael, what's your last name, Michael? Ostachowski. I think I got that. Pretty close, pretty close. Came to the cafe here at 390 West Hastings, and he won himself a copy of the Avengers Endgame, or Phase Finale in French. Sorry. Phase Finale. Courtesy of Marvel Studios Canada and Disney Canada. They sent this out to you. So thank you, Michael. Thanks for your support. And you get to watch this incredible movie, which I'll have a review of very soon. But the Borderlands 3 hands-on was not too long ago, and I had a really, really good time, which I'm not surprised by because I've always enjoyed the Borderlands games. I wasn't one of those super fans right from the get-go. It took a little while for me to kind of get the groove and get addicted to the loot loops that are in that game. And certainly that's where they started from with Borderlands 3. Borderlands 3, I think, has got this interesting kind of dynamic here. They've got to appeal to the longtime fans of the franchise, but they also have to appease the modern gamer who's had a lot of different games that have maybe been inspired a little bit by Borderlands. When you look at a game like Destiny or look at a game like The Division, that sort of RPG loot kind of cycle that we can get on with lots of really intricate types of game design. So they've got to appeal to discerning players, but also the super fans. And there's a lot of expectations on the sense of humor. That's why I think the writers were brought out for us to interview, and they were great guys. They were kind of relatively new to these positions, but what they both stressed is that Randy Pitchford is still overseeing everything. He is kind of the George Lucas of the Borderlands universe, and certainly there's been some drama and some controversy around Borderlands and some of the stuff around getting this game out to market and the back and forth with the media that Randy has had. But that's a small, tiny bit of the story of this game because it's a massive game. There's a lot of people working on it, not just at Gearbox in Dallas, but I think they have a studio in Montreal, and there's hundreds of people trying to put this thing together. And you can see that the fidelity of the experience has been vastly improved from Borderlands 2 already from what I've been able to play. I put probably about 4 hours into it. It's a beautiful game that I think had its roots in beautiful games that were cel-shaded and cartoony, and so your question is how much better can they make it look with 4K resolution if it's already kind of looking like it's a cel-shaded cartoon? And it is better, absolutely. But it's not like the graphics punch out and you go, oh my God, I've never seen any visuals like this, because that's not true. You have. In your mind's eye, when you think of Borderlands 1 and 2, they kind of look like this with that kind of level of clarity. Now, going back to those games, you know, they do look a little bit dated, and this definitely does look a lot more modern. That's not the story with this game. The story is it's incredibly fun to play. The mechanics are really solid and really sound. Running through the levels and climbing up onto ledges and the jumps and the gunplay, all of that is just much more refined and a lot tighter. The one thing that I will say that was a bit disappointing was that there are still some pretty chunky load times. Like, you get a pretty big area, but it's not an open world game. Like, you get a big area. It's not always just like arena and then sort of narrow pathway or corridor or anything that, and then another big arena. But there are situations in the game where it does kind of feel like that, like you're going through the tunnels and the tubes, and then you get out into a wider space and you can get into the cars and stuff, and they loop around in some paths that become unlocked based on objectives getting cleared out. I kind of feel like we were ready to go into a much more open feeling Borderlands experience that didn't have gates and didn't have loading screens. I was a bit surprised that is still a part of the design, but there is a ton of detail and a ton of lore and a lot of voice acting and a lot of spoken dialogue and little bits and pieces that are coming through. Like, this is a game loaded with character, and that's so important. And I feel like maybe injecting all of that into your play experience and loading it all in real time would be a difficult proposition. It didn't bother me all that much. The other thing that I would say, and I asked when I talked with one of the game producers at the earlier reveal and our earlier hands-on, is I wondered about any kind of flying mechanics or being able to get up into the air or anything, and they don't really have that as far as I know yet. But it does feel like it's accessible and it's familiar and it's super fun, and the core sort of fundamental stuff that you would want out of Borderlands is there. I haven't been shocked by something brand new that I had never seen before out of the details that I have played so far, and that is a little disappointing, but it's also hard to refute that I had a blast, and it was really hard to put the controller down and to walk away. I played as two different Vault Hunters. I played as Flak, who is like this robot that has these different creatures that he has as pets that he can throw out into the battle, which was super fun. And I played as Amara, who has these kind of like psionic, ethereal types of special attacks and powers and stuff. And both of them were super fun. I enjoyed Flak, though. And I met this little teddy bear that I fused onto another robot. The AI had been stuck into this robotic teddy bear, and he was so sassy and foul-mouthed and hilarious. And then you pick him up and you stick him onto another robot that's hovering around with you. And there's a good sense of humor in this. It was a lot of fun. It's very colorful. It's very much in the vein of what we've had before. Haven't seen stuff that has completely shocked me, but I had a big smile on my face, and it was tough to stop playing. So I think that's okay. That's kind of what we want out of a Borderlands experience. Okay, you guys, we haven't had one in a little while. It's time for a buried treasure. All right, today's buried treasure is not for the squeamish. This was suggested by Mr. Price on Twitter, saying we should look at MadWorld. Now, this is definitely an M-rated game with unbelievable violence. It's definitely going to make you squirm a little bit because bodies get beaten around and thrashed. Kind of like what Hulk did to Loki, actually, in the first Avengers movie. There's a lot of that kind of violence in this game. It was out for the Wii back in 2009, and it's kind of reminiscent of black and white comic books like Sin City from Frank Miller, but it's just, you know, completely overrun by crazy over-the-top violence. You're in the middle of a game show, and you've got to dole out all kinds of punishment to lots of goons. You can chainsaw them up or throw tires at them or play a game of man darts and use a baseball bat and smash them into a giant dartboard, and you get points for that. And under the guise of this game show, you're being sort of egged on and cheered and challenged with all kinds of little different obstacles and challenges that will unlock the eventual giant boss fights, which are crazy and over the top and completely in keeping with the insanity of this game. It's got a really cool aesthetic for sure, but at the core is this unbelievable action-adventure combo-rific gameplay that Platinum Games is famous for. They really knew how to make us connected to the controls, and even though there's some wee waggle in this game, it never got in the way. It never got too, cumbersome or aggravating or any of that stuff. This was a really fun, really cool experience, and frankly, it's a little surprising that we haven't had MadWorld come back with an HD remaster or something like that. It's still a ton of fun, and MadWorld is absolutely a buried treasure. Yeah, there's a lot of Sega love in the show today. We are going to carry on with that love. We've got the Sega Genesis Mini. Sega sent this out to us. We are not in review mode yet, obviously, but we are going to unbox it right now and see what's in the box. Hopefully you guys get a nice clear shot right there. It's beautiful. It has sort of the classic styling, like right out of 1989, which is crazy. And 30 years, I can't believe it. And then you get 40 games that are included on this thing. Plus 2 extras. You get. I can't even read that. Okay, I don't have my reading glasses on right now. Okay, so let's take a look inside the box here. It's Sega Genesis packaging, which I love. I had one of these back in 1989. I rushed to the video game store, and I freaking adored this system. We're going to start with opening up the little Mini right here. That is the size of it right here. So let's start with this right now. It is, as the name implies, quite mini. There it is. It looks like the very first generation of the Sega Genesis. It has a little volume slider here, which actually doesn't work. The on-off button, just like the old days. And you've got a little reset button right here, which I guess will take you right back to the menu. I'm going to take the plastic off because we are going to play this a little bit. HDMI connector in the back, and the power connector, which I think is probably the USB style. Yeah, it's got the USB style brick right there, so you can plug that in. Oh, a little bit lower right here. You got the USB style brick right there. Okay. And we get 2 controllers in the box, which is cool. I like that these mini consoles that are coming out right now are all about the getting multiple players in front of the television set and getting some couch co-op going or some couch competition going. So we're going to actually unravel these right now. So these are the Gen 1 3-button Sega Genesis controllers, which, man, this feels big. I've been playing with the 8-bit DOE controller on my analog Mega SG, and it's a little tinier than this. But this feels good, feels sturdy. I'm looking forward to giving this a shot right now. So not 1, but 2 of those, which is a pretty generous offering. The whole package, by the way, comes out next month, and it is $80 in the U.S. and it's $100 in Canada. And with 42 games and 2 controllers and the hardware, I think that's a pretty damn good deal. There are some excellent games included in this collection, by the way. So 2 controllers. Got some Sanics in there, yep, for sure. Put some of this down on the ground. And then we get an HDMI cable, super important. Can't have enough of these. Boom. And Some classic style instruction booklets right there, basically telling you don't stick this in your mouth. And then the power cable right here. There you go. So we are going to plug this in and give the Sega Genesis Mini a test in a second. But first, I got a chance to play some Wolfenstein Youngblood. Here's my review.
Where'd you get these power suits?
Made them. All the Nazi generals have these nowadays, so you will need it.
Holy fucking shit.
Wolfenstein Youngblood came out a couple of weeks ago, and I've got to admit, it's taken me a couple of weeks to get into this game for a couple of reasons. One of them is that I heard a lot of negative buzz about this, but this is a little bit more of a games-as-service model, sort of in the shoes and the sort of ripples of something like The Division or Destiny, where you have a hub world and you go off on a bunch of missions and you see a lot of the same areas over again. I was like, well, it doesn't sound like the Wolfenstein that I know and love. But also, I was having some issues running this game in 4K resolution on my PS4 Pro. I see little white dots in the black areas of my screen. It's hard for me to kind of replicate that with the footage that we're providing, but the way that I had to avoid it was dumb my visuals down to 1080p. It's not that big of a deal, but I was just surprised that I had any kind of an issue there at all.
That's what we got.
You play as BJ Blazkowicz's twin daughters, who are both lethal weapons.
Fuck yeah!
They have these cool skin-tight suits that give them armor protection and a little bit of flair as well. And then you've got abilities like the double jump, which is something that's available to you right from the get-go. And you do some jumping puzzles in this game from first person, which can be a bit of a challenge for people out there for sure. And my mobility, I think, was the thing that I latched onto the most with this game. I just loved playing as these characters. Super, super fast and fluid and fun, and you dole out punishment in wonderful ways. You can also upgrade your character's abilities so that you have more health or more armor, carry heavier weapons, you can keep your stealth running for a little bit longer. You've got a choice at the beginning of the game where you can choose to have a stealth option that lets you go invisible for a bit, or you can use the crush option, which lets you power through doors or power through bad guys in some pretty cool and devastating ways. And then, of course, you are packed with all kinds of fantastic Nazi-killing weaponry, which isn't quite the star of the show. I think the freedom and the mobility and the verticality that the game provides is really the star of the show, because we've seen a lot of these weapons before, although it is super fun to slice through giant, rampaging Nazi robot dogs with laser guns. It's really cool. It's fun to blast away at Nazi Terminators. It's fun to chip away at the armor on these big hulking Nazi brutes that are coming at you, and they just seem impervious. And then you find the right sort of weapon combination, and ping, 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 little pieces of armor go off, and then finally their helmet, and finally you get that headshot, and that Nazi crumples to the floor. It does feel, though, however, that the game is really pushing that "isn't it fun to kill Nazis" button, you know? And that's always been the case with Wolfenstein, for sure, especially the more recent ones. And there couldn't be a better time to go hunting Nazis in video games.
Let's go!
But I don't know if this game provides something that is extraordinarily different from a lot of the free-to-play kind of action-based cooperative stuff that's out there. I keep thinking of Apex Legends, which of course has a beautiful fluidity. There's all kinds of incredible mobility and weaponry and cooperative fun to be had in a game like Apex Legends, and it doesn't cost you a dime. This does cost you some money, although it's not a full-price game. It's going to cost, around $50. And then one of the cool things that they've done here is they've given you a buddy pass so you can share this game with somebody and play through it cooperatively together. That's the whole emphasis on this title, is that you're playing with somebody else, whether it's an AI-controlled bot or another player that you can invite from a public kind of space, or you create your own sort of private environment and invite somebody in.
Let me show you something.
I tried a little bit of all of it. I have to admit that I enjoyed it as a single-player game, too. It's a weird setup. You can't just choose, I want to play single-player. You have to go into host a match, and then you don't invite anybody, basically, and then you just start the game. And your sister is controlled by the computer and functionally operates very similarly to you, puts all the onus on you to kind of take down the bosses and beat the Nazis in a nice progressive order so that you're getting the level ups and all the loot that you want so that you can keep progressing into the game.
You should indulge in every moment.
It was also incredibly fun. I played with Ungerbar Plays, Hunter, actually, who came on to EP Live and did a great job in front of the audience playing the game on stage. He actually joined me online. Wolfenstein, he's much farther into the game than I am, so he was just slashing through all kinds of big bads and helping me out in some big ways. Knew lots of nooks and crannies and different alleyways to get lost in and fight our way out of. There's no big map that you get when you enter into a world. You get the little mini maps, so there are some confusing elements about which corner you take, where you go. And if you take the wrong corner, you're going to run into Nazis that are much more overpowered than you are, and they're going to take you down. And there's a ruthlessness to this game.
Good luck.
I played it with Blake as well, who was at a lower level than I was, and we were having all kinds of difficulty facing up against Nazis that were my level, so he was getting mowed down with 1 or 2 shots, and I would last for a little while, but then I didn't have my buddies, so I was getting slaughtered as well. I love the stylings of this game, as I have the previous Wolfenstein games. I love the sci-fi 80s kind of pop-punk vibe throughout this whole thing. I like the attitude of B.J. Blazkowicz's daughters.
Can't you just enjoy life for a second, Jess?
You don't get a lot of story in this title. I think it's really a test that Bethesda is putting out there to see how they can extrapolate the Wolfenstein brand and different ways that they can engage gamers. This does feel like they're edging towards some kind of a free-to-play games-as-service model with this franchise. You know, in the context of other great games that are free-to-play, that offer a lot of similar things, this doesn't feel as great of a deal, and I'm certainly aware that a lot of people out there that wanted a single-player story campaign like they've had with the previous couple of Wolfenstein titles.
You guys are weird.
It's not the same as the previous Wolfenstein games. I'm not sure that that's a bad thing. I think it's okay to kind of extend this universe. It's a super cool one. I had fun, and I'm going to keep playing this game for sure, but I don't know if it resonates like Machine Game's first couple of kicks at Wolfenstein have. I'm going to give Wolfenstein Youngblood an 8 out of 10. We are back, and we have plugged in the Sega Genesis Mini, and man, this is really cool hardware. I gotta say, Sega did an amazing job emulating it. Look, there's a little cartridge slot and everything in this thing. It's so cool. This doesn't do anything.
Mini cartridge to go in.
I know, that would be amazing. Maybe somebody's working on that. That would be so cool. It looks so great. So we're going to try and figure out how to play a little bit of the games themselves. Okay, so let's actually go through all of the games. So we got Alex Kidd, Altered Beast. Okay, we can't go full screen on the game yet, but we're having some aspect ratio issues or something like that with the HDMI. But we've got Wonder Boy, Toe Jam, and Earl. We unboxed it and plugged it in live, so we probably shouldn't have done that, but it's working.
Sonic 1, Sonic 2.
We got Castle of Illusion and Golden Axe and what is this, Thunder Force 3?
Golden Axe, the good 2-player.
Okay, unplugging us for a second. All right, we're trying to reboot the HDMI.
It's like Dad on Christmas.
Yeah, there we go. Kid Chameleon, I used to love that game. Strider, some classics in here. Echo the Dolphin, we had Ed Annunziata on the show not too long ago talking about the roots of Echo, which is amazing. Road Rash 2, that's great.
Sonic Spin
World of Illusion, I played this a little bit not too long ago, and I was blown away by it. Oh, really? Okay. So apparently there's some issue with the HDMI as we've got it sort of set up. We've got it through a splitter and everything, so we're not getting a lock signal that we can cut to. But we will record this and record the games and do a full review of this. But we can we'll just go off camera here. Audio is fine, video is not fine through our setup and system right here as we patched it in and went live. We knew we were risking a little bit by unboxing and plugging in during a live stream. Well, we'll find out. I'm sure it's not. I mean, we're seeing it fine on the screen. I think it's just a... is there another... Okay, is there another, do you want to try a different HDMI cable directly into here? Okay. It's probably the switcher. Okay, well, why don't we play a 2-player something here? What do we got?
Was the one you said
Actually, you play, and we'll do a little Let's Play and chat. So whatever you want to jump onto right now, you can play. Thanks for joining me, Brett, by the way.
No, my pleasure.
All right.
Anytime.
Greg Seward says the lineup doesn't change, but you get to play the Regions version of the game.
By the way, Vic, every time you change a game, it kicks the HDMI signal.
Oh, really? Okay. So it may not be perfectly set up for live streaming, is what we're discovering right now. It might be because this was the day that the embargo broke on this as well. So I don't think there's lots of videos of people streaming this just yet. I asked Sega if it was okay if we could do a little live stream. The game's playing fine on the TV, but in terms of like pumping it through a switcher and going live on it, some few little technical hiccups going on for us right now. But it is playing fine, sounds fine in the space. You guys are probably getting the audio just fine. Let's see what we got here. Aspect ratio of vintage games for 4:3 might look weird on 4K. Oh, okay. So I'm supposed to play over to that camera. Yeah. It's probably outputting a 720p signal, and we've got a 1080p switcher.
Tech stuff, yeah. Tech stuff. Yep.
Yeah, well, it's definitely an HD signal. It's up-resed for HD.
Definitely. Tech stuff.
Yeah. Which was also outputting to HD.
Yeah. No.
So playing the classic Sonic. Okay, you guys are talking about Nazis because we had Wolfenstein in the show.
Nazi game. Good hybrid.
We got famous Seamus in the chat and Sam I am 111. If you change the language settings in the Genesis Mini, does the lineup of titles change for that region as well? No, I don't think so. I think it's locked to the same setups.
Sonic did the work.
Oh, wait a sec. Greg answered that. He said the lineup doesn't change, but you get to play that region's version of the game. Okay, that's what you were talking about. So that's pretty cool. Same games, but you get to play the, I guess, the PAL version or the, would it be the PAL version? I don't know. Would they change to PAL? No, probably not. But you play the Japanese version of the game. Let's see what we got here. Needs more cowbell from the VR grid. Trivia, Sonic's shoes were inspired by Michael Jackson. Yeah, cool. Michael Jackson had a lot of love for Sega and ended up working with, I think they worked on Sonic 3. I think he did some music for Sonic 3 before he did the Moonwalker game. Audrey on Leon said, no Sonic 3, Sonic Knuckles, Streets and Rage 1 and 3. Very disappointed with that. It is a bit weird when they leave some of the series off of the chip, but there are 42 games included on this, so it's pretty hard to be too pissed off here. You know, it's pretty hard to be really pissed off about this. It's a lot of value for the money. Chris Wright laughing his ass off about that Moonwalker game. A Moonraker game would be a lot of fun, actually. Let's see. Chris Seward is going through the lineup right now in the chat. Earthworm Jim is on this.
Yeah.
Yes, which is cool. Let's pop out of this. How do we back out of the thing? I think you hold down the start button and it brings up the menu.
I love that he's balancing.
There it is. Okay, so we want to go to return to main menu. Bam. There you go. So choose something else. Let's go through the items that we have in here. I love that Castlevania and Contra are both included on here. It's great that Sega got a nice collection of third-party as well as first-party stuff. You gonna play Golden Axe?
It's classic.
Okay, all right, let's do it.
You can play Golden Axes too. The thing I like about these is that they feel like the old ones.
Yes,
they
do.
That nice, good size, good feel to it.
Yeah, the joypad feels great actually, and the buttons feel really solid. Maybe hit reset on the console. Yes, you can do that as well. 007's Legends did have a Moonraker segment to it. Thank you, Sam I am 111. Did everyone check out the retro throwback commercial that Sega put out today? I haven't seen that yet, but I definitely want to see that. I sent them a video of my Genesis memories, which I'll share with you guys. I used to live before EP, well before EP, in a house with 6 or 7 other people to kind of cut the rent down. We took over a whole house, and we each paid about $300 a month. It's actually a pretty smart way to do it. But I brought the Genesis to our shared house, and we played through games like NHL and Golden Axe and Sonic the Hedgehog, and we used to sing the song together. We used to we came up with words, Sonic the Hedgehog. We used to sing it and pass the controller around and get into it, and it was such a cool. It was such an amazing memory, and I really could see that video games could affect people emotionally. And that eventually led to EP, taking in all of that stuff. I'm getting in your way on that.
It's all good.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Can I jump in right away, or do I?
I don't know. That's a good question. I was actually just thinking that. Oh my gosh!
No,
Please, no, come back here. No.
No, you can't. You can't. You got to pick that right from the beginning. Surprised they've added a Mickey Mouse game. They had excellent Mickey Mouse. I think there's 2 Mickey Mouse games on here. I think Castle of Illusion and World of Illusion are on here. I had the cartridge for Castle of Illusion. My girlfriend, who's my wife now, and I, at the time, we loved playing that game together. That's the thing, man. Like, I think a lot of modern consoles are all about getting together with friends online, but these classic consoles didn't have any of that. So they were in the living room, and we shared those experiences with our friends and our loved ones and our family, and there's a lot of emotional connection tied in with that, and the nostalgic sort of sugarcoating plays a part of that as well. But yeah, I have great memories. Classic games. Let's see, we got Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine is in there. It's only Streets of Rage 2, which is a bit weird. Toe Jam and Earl. The Wonder Boy game is in there. Vector Man, an underappreciated gem. We've got Beyond Oasis, which is super cool, and Columns, which was a pretty solid gravity-based puzzle game. Eternal Champions, which was a superhero fighting game. This is kind of a masterclass in fantastic Sega Genesis, gems. There's some great stuff in here. I love that Echo the Dolphin is on here as well. Very cool stuff. That's why I love playing Street Fighter 4 at the Rec Room. Random people will come up and talk to you. Blair Farrell. Yeah, I think that there's something so incredibly valuable by sharing that game experience, having a television and sharing that whole thing with your friends in the same room. I think that's really, really cool. Question, asked this before, not sure you saw it, but any controller problems from Nintendo Boy 17? Have you noticed any lag or any hesitation?
No, not really. No, it's pretty good.
I mean, we just opened it.
Pretty responsive, yeah.
Yeah, I'll have a full review in September. But I've been looking forward to this, and clearly Sega's been paying attention to what Nintendo's done. They worked with M2 to do all of the porting to the machine and all of the development to make sure that the ROMs were as solid as they possibly could be through this emulation. M2 has done some excellent work in the past too. So yeah, I think this is going to be a very, very solid game escape, man. I'm really looking forward to it. Vic, do you think the Sonic the Hedgehog movie will be good? From Jeff Meacham. No, I don't, but I hope it is. It would be great if it was. The Pokemon movie surprised a lot of people, and I think that's
pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I think they've set the bar there, right? They got to be there. Danny Johnson says, "Hey Vic, what games are not here that you would have liked to have had?" I'm just getting familiar with the list right now.
Jungle Strike.
Yeah, the Strike games were excellent on the
yeah.
Genesis. I love the superhero games, and Sega had them, right? Like they had the X-Men games and they had Spider-Man.
Yes.
I talked to Ed Annunziata.
100% X-Men game.
Yeah, those were amazing, but of course that's a whole bout of licensing that they would have had to gone through, which we kept talking about.
It's one of the only two.
They have the Disney
games,
games, so they worked with Disney on Castle of Illusion, and Earthworm Jim would have been a license deal. But it's a bit disappointing that there aren't the side-scrolling superhero games. Sega did Adventures of Batman and Robin, which was a decent shooter. It was a weird direction for Batman, but it was a pretty fun game. But Capcom made, I think the Punisher game was pretty rad. The Captain America and the Avengers game that they made was excellent on this.
Little Shield and Hawkeye. And,
yeah. And the X-Men stuff and Spider-Man. There's some classic stuff. Let's see another game.
Let's do it. Hold on.
So those are the first things that pop into mind. I love that Road Rash 2 is on this machine.
We're firing up right now,
honestly, NHL 94 or 93 should have been on here. Don't you guys think? It should have been an NHL game, right?
There's Road Rash. Let's do that.
But I can't complain, man. Like 42 games, 2 controllers, the hardware, and it's $100 in Canada, $80 in the States. That's crazy. You're paying $2 a game. Less than that because you're getting all the hardware as well. I knew you, Danny. I knew you'd be disappointed with no Batman game. I think that was the only. They made Batman Returns for the Genesis, but I don't think I ever actually played Batman Returns on the Genesis. I played it on the Super Nintendo. The Mutant League games, Sunset Riders is. Sam I Am 111 says the Mutant League game should have been on there. Blair Farrell says Sunset Riders. The Mutant League hockey game, Sam I Am 111. I have 100 of the best PS1 games on my PS Classic. Oh, you did a little hacking, did you? Genesis collection for PS4 includes online multiplayer and VR support. You play in a 90s bedroom and play on a CRT. They did a good job with the Sega Genesis collection. I have that too on the Switch, and I play it all the time. Though it's very solid that you can cart it away. But there's something to be said about the retro nostalgic experience, right? I love this freaking game.
I think it's like half of the game, the thing about a console is that the input device you're putting into it changes per console. So like when you touch, putting your hands on a Sega Genesis versus N64 controller, it's just a different experience.
Totally is, yeah, 100%. I mean, it's very cool that they put these in. I'm going to, I have the M30, the Genesis-like controller that 8-Bit Dough made, and I believe they have a USB receiver. So I'll get one of those and I'll try that controller with this because it's a 6-button controller. I don't think any of the games that they chose, by the way, are 6-button games. But of course what they did is they moved to 6-button game development quite a bit once those controllers came out there. Let's see if they have... The Streets of Rage 2 is on there, but I don't know if Street Fighter is on there. I'm not sure. Comic Zone? Oh my god, that's a classic. I have Comic Zone on almost everything. I have it on my phone. I have it on the Xbox. I've got it on the PlayStation. I love that game. That's a game that Sega should absolutely revisit or work with some developers to bring back again. That would be great. Phantasy Star 4, Dynamite Headdy. There are hours of games, hours and hours of fun with these games right here. It still looks pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is all 2D design, but they did a pretty damn solid job of streaming the road towards you. And I have Road Rash 3 for my Genesis, and I like it, but I feel like they got a little too ambitious. I think this was the sweet spot. That's probably why they chose it.
Does this one have weapons still? Like,
yeah, you can pick up bats and bash people off the...
No one's throwing a weapon at me.
Yeah, it's super fun. What's the release date on this, Blake? It's September. Is it the 14th? Okay. Well, it comes out next month, but today I guess they wanted to get us all talking about Sega Genesis because it's the 30th anniversary of the Sega Genesis launching.
Killer Instinct would be nice.
No, that's Super Nintendo.
Is it?
That was a Rare developed game, yeah. And Rare was working almost exclusively with they were a second-party developer.
I was thinking Shaq Fu. There was 2 fighting games that I played. They were just weird ones.
Shaq Fu. Oh my god, I haven't heard that in ages.
It was terrible, but so good.
They made that Shaq Fu game. They made another version of Shaq Fu not too long ago. Yeah, they brought it back a 3D version.
Oh, they didn't need to do that.
Light Crusader is on here. Oh, they have the Mega Man game on there too. Yeah, this is a great collection. So I'll dive in. I will I'll check out all of the games and play them and record a bunch of footage, and we'll have a full review when I can talk about this thing in full. But I'm impressed so far. I like the menu setup. I like the fact that you can save. Yeah, it's really, really dope. Thank you, Sega, for sending us one of those, and stay tuned for the review on that and some more information about all of that Sega Genesis stuff. What's up? Oh, play to this camera now. So that's going to do it for our episode today. Thank you, Brett. Thank you for coming down to 390 West Hastings to be a part of the show. Thank you again to Josh Holmes for driving out to see us here in studio. Great visiting with you. And thanks for all of you watching. We're going to take a little bit of a break for the next couple of weeks. I've actually got a wedding to go fly to, and I'm going to be spending some time with the family. We'll still be posting some videos, but EP Live isn't coming back until the first week of September. I'll have some news on who our guests are going to be. They're starting to come together already. We're going to have some great shows, so definitely come down to the studio to see the show live if you can, but we'll be back with lots of streaming content for you in September, EP Live-wise, but lots of reviews are going to be coming up on the channel very soon. Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure that you play forever.